We had a new one this morning. It's a little loud out there. So the issue with this truck, this guy called me. He told me his fan on his truck is running like crazy. His temperature is way low. The AC doesn't work, and his check engine light came on. So I did a little bit of research. A, Google it. B, YouTube it. Or C, and probably the best is look at the manufacturer service information. So I took a look at a few different things. This truck is a 2014 Silverado. If any of the temperature sensors that have to do with the logic of turning the fan on have, a failure, the fail-safe for the truck is, we're not sure what the temperature is, blast the fan and keep it as cool as possible so that it doesn't overheat or damage anything. So that's what we got right now, right? I could say, oh yeah, it's the sensor, but which sensor? There's several different sensors that look at temperature, check temperature, right? Coolant temperature, engine oil temperature, possibly even transmission fluid temperature. There's going to be a bunch of sensors that are an input to the computer which controls that fan. So clearly one of them is messing up, but which one? I don't know, and probably you don't know either. So that little check engine light's going to be our baseline. So I'm getting my scan tool cranking here. You got a couple options. Because it's a check engine light, I really only need to worry about the engine control module, the ECM. But because my scan tool can check others, I'm just going to run the full test on all of them, just to see maybe by chance something else is like in the peripheral of this issue, something maybe with air conditioning or who knows. So I'm gonna run them all. Alright, so the only ones with codes are engine and ABS, and it looks like for whatever reason we got a few things that were happening with the wheel speed sensors at one point. It's interesting, it's the left and the right front. I've seen that before on a two-wheel drive. If the customer's stuck, the rear wheels are spinning because they're trying to get out, and the front wheels are doing nothing, and it kind of is a false DTC, thinking that the front wheel speed sensors are no good. See, low signal amplitude. More importantly, P0128 is a very common DTC. It's just that the engine coolant temperature is below the thermostat regulating temperature. So let me, I was going to go out there and show you this. Matter of fact, I can, but I don't really want to shut the ignition off on this truck because this has an intermittent issue and it's happening right now, so I don't want to turn it off and give it a chance to reset. So I'll explain right from here. The engine's trying to warm up right now, so the thermostat should be closed. The engine's just heating, the heat is circulating within the engine only. That's it. It should not escape past the thermostat and go into the radiator and start being cooled yet. The fact that it's setting the P0128 means it's staying too cool or it's taking too long to warm up. The basic description of that is probably the thermostat is stuck open, at least partially, and that's allowing the coolant that's trying to warm up to go and start being cooled through the radiator. But because this has a fan running all the time, in theory it shouldn't really affect it that much because the coolant shouldn't be going out to the radiator anyway. But I'm not going to go really crazy on the P0128. I'm really going to try to nail down why is his fan running first. This may turn into, let's say I figure out which sensor it is. It's maybe going to be the coolant temperature sensor. If I'm going to do a coolant temperature sensor, I'm going to need to drain the coolant. And if I'm going to drain the coolant, I'm probably going to tell them, hey, let's do a thermostat, because most likely, that's what that one's going to have to do with. But if it ends up being something with like an oil temperature sensor, I would probably clear this, fix the actual issue, drive it, and see if that comes back. So my next step is I'm going to go in the data list and look at all the sensor values. All right, I noticed something. So the engine coolant temperature is coming up. The ambient air temperature looks normal. I'd have to get my other scan tool to get more of these values, but I want to watch that temperature gauge right here. I want to see if that comes up, because there are multiple sensors on a lot of these GM vehicles. So it's possible that this sensor is really just for the ECM, and it may use the same or a different sensor for that. And I did look this up while I was at work, I think a couple days ago, and I don't really recall, so I got to do a little more digging on this one. So I've been at idle for 10 minutes. This thing's not warming up anymore, and I was watching the temperature. I got up to like 140. So something's up with it right now. So figured, let me jump back to that code, jump into freeze frame. Let me see what type of information I could find. I'm trying to get the glare down. And then especially, oh, you know what? It might not have stored engine coolant temperature. That's a little surprising. But that is where I would like to go and look and see what the coolant temperature sensor was when this code's set. So it looks like I'm out of luck there. Actually, I had to scroll further. So when this fault's set, the engine coolant temperature is 147, which that's kind of weird. I would expect to have seen that down near -40 or maybe showing full high. That seems like a believable range for me. So this is when that P0128 set. The reason it's going to set when that's the temperature is because it should be up to 200 or 190, 200, and it's staying pretty low. So that kind of explains the P0128. I'm sure they're going to be related, but I'm not so sure that this coolant temperature sensor is causing this fan to come on, because that's a reasonable number there. More digging. So I jump back into live data. This is not a recorded, this is real temperature right now. And we're losing, we're going down. 125. It should not be getting cooler. It should be getting warmer. So I want to do something. It's loud. I'm going to disconnect the sensor. Alright, my logic there, I want to see if that's in fact the data that we're looking at, and it is. Drop to -40. So actually, that circuit seems okay. There's a chance that sensor is malfunctioning, but there's a chance it's not. And if it is, it's a little bit intermittent. So now I've got a... the fan's running, but this event is not actually happening right now, it appears. So more digging. This one is kind of weird. I cleared the codes, and since I cleared the codes, I'm now wanting to watch this coolant temperature sensor. As soon as I cleared that P0128, the fans stopped running, and this sensor started reading something. But if you look at this this sensor saying 149, that one's already showing like 190, coming up on 200. So either there's a different sensor for that, which is possible, or GM does some funny stuff with programming their gauge sometime to not read the total accurate temperature. But I gotta figure, this is really my baseline. Either that thermostat is stuck open and it's constantly flowing to the radiator, and it sets that code, and as a result of that code, it runs the fan. That's possibility one. Possibility two is there's a different problem, whether it's the coolant temperature sensor or the refrigerant pressure sensor for the air conditioning or something that's causing a fault that's making the fan run, and the fan is preventing it from warming up. And the thermostat actually is not a problem. And to be honest, I'm not sure. So I'm going to run it for a bit and see if this thing will get up to full operating temperature now that I've cleared the code and the fan is not running. If it normalizes without the fan running, I'm kind of assuming the fan is causing it to run cold. If this thing doesn't start warming up pretty quick, I would diagnose it as a stuck open thermostat. I'd go get a thermostat, replace the thermostat, and then I would retry this procedure again. But I'm hoping I can nail this down. I don't want to replace something and then find something else or misdiagnose it. So the third option is I haven't figured it out yet. But those are the two that I'm really trying to narrow down right now. All right, as you can see, we're at 199. Fully warmed up. This one's going to be a pain. One of my next steps, I want to see where we're at with air conditioning. Pressure. So let me flip this around. 90 and a little over 100 is probably going to be okay. That's the static pressure because I don't have the AC on. So I'm going to actually turn on the AC. We'll hear that clutch kick. Clutch kicked on, the fans came on low. That's building its way up towards 200. It's pulling the low side down, so this is at least reasonably charged. Yeah, so it doesn't appear that the AC is going to be the problem. I'm kind of backed off the thermostat because now that I've got the cooling fans shut down by clearing the code, it did fully warm up. So this one, I'd love to totally nail this one down, and I'm going to try by driving it and trying to get the issue to occur, and the second it occurs, trying to see if I can find, a temperature sensor that's reading incorrectly. But if I can't, I may go for that engine coolant temperature sensor as like a educated guess. But I really like to nail these down. This one may fight me a little bit. So I'm gonna pop those gauges off and continue. So I had another thought. I'm over here at the right front. The refrigerant pressure sensor is right here. The silver tape right here. See, there it is. If that was malfunctioning, even though the AC pressure was good, it could indicate, overpressure, which would indicate over temperature, and it would think that the condenser's super hot, so that could make the fan kick on. So I'm just wiggling the harness, tapping the sensor, but that didn't make anything happen. I did the same thing for engine coolant. I'm thinking of any other sensors that may play a part. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to walk away from this and log in and look at what all the inputs are to this system. And plan B would be replace what a lot of people are replacing, which I'm well aware that a lot of people are doing the engine coolant temperature sensor. Quite a few people are doing the thermostat, but I really like to nail these down so I know that I'm right, because I see at least a handful of other possibilities as to why that fan would be kicking on. So still looking. Alright, actually it looks like a road test is going to clarify this for me. I was up near 200 degrees idling, and now that I'm out on the road, it looks to me like that temperature's dropping. the temperature should not be dropping, and the fans aren't running. So if the temperature is dropping, that's because the thermostat is stuck open or partially open. So I'm going to see if what this temperature continues to do on a decent road test. And if it does what I think it's doing, I'll have it diagnosed. Yeah, I'm feeling confident. I'm coming down this hill right now, and I noticed the longer I'm coasting, the lower it's getting. So that tells me quite a bit. I'm gonna zoom, make sure you're still seeing some stuff. That temperature, I've been in the truck 15 minutes driving. That temperature should be around 200, 210. Definitely should not be this cool. So I already pretty much have this diagnosed as a thermostat, but I really want to make sure that that thermostat is also causing the fans to run. I don't want to find out, oh, this has a thermostat, I put a thermostat in it, and then come to find out it was also a different additional issue that's making the fans run. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep trying to drive it. You see, I mean, we're down to like a bump in the zoom. We're just about getting closer to 160, but the gauge is not pegged. It's not like it was when I found the when I came up to the truck. The gauge was pegged at 160 and wouldn't move. The gauge is working. It's just that the engine is literally getting cooler as I go. So the thermostat's clearly not doing its job. But like what I was saying is I'm going to try to drive this long enough to get the engine control module to run the thermostat test. So it'll do a test. It'll test how long it takes to warm up. It may take multiple trips. So right down here, I'm going to put it in park, shut it off, start it back up, drive a little bit further. And if it fails the test and sets the code P0128 and the check engine light comes on, and I verify that in that moment it initiates the fan coming on, I'll know that this thermostat problem is the root cause. And if I was at a shop, this is probably not how I'd proceed, but this is just between me and this owner, and I got some errands to run, so I'm going to use his truck, and I'm not really wasting my time, so I'm not billing him for my time right now because I got things to do. If I was trying to bill my hourly rate at over $100 an hour, I would turn around right now and sell a thermostat. But I'm going to see this one out a little bit further, and I will update. You can see it's creeping back up now that I'm going to be accelerating here, but it's interesting. All right, so definitely diagnosed that as a thermostat. Here's the thermostat, but while I'm there, because it's kind of a known issue, there's that engine coolant temperature sensor. Just did both. In this case, because I got the P0128 and it won't get up to operating temperature, that's a thermostat diagnose. If you don't have the check engine light with the P0128 and yours is, just the fans kicking on, this is probably your more likely culprit. But I would look at that data that I was seeing before and see if maybe this one's reading -40 or some abnormal temperature. But in a way, if you're going to do one, it kind of makes sense to do both because they're right next to each other, and you got to drain the coolant, and then you got to fill and bleed the coolant. And so to actually do the repair, this is what I would do. Pull the intake, so that's like an 8. A couple of these type of connectors, push up. Right as you push up, that'll center it up. And then this one is actually a push down on the little plastic. Pop those two, fold them back, take it off of here, another 8, get the box out of the way. I personally moved the belt off to the side because when I unbolt that, coolant gets on the belt squeaks. You could also maybe drain it at a lower petcock or off the lower hose to avoid that, but because this coolant's not really bad, I'm just looking to get the coolant low enough to do the job. So I didn't want to drain the whole radiator. So this is how I did it. Now that I got it in there, I'm going to swing the belt back on. This has 3 belts. Got the main drive belt, which is practically really for the water pump, an alternator, and then I've got an AC belt down there. That's a stretch belt. And there's yet another one way down here. That's a vacuum pump belt. Those 2 are stretch belts. Those are a pain in the butt. You got to cut them off and then put them on with a special tool, which I have.
It'd be a good idea to do the belts, but the customer declined because it's over $100 for those belts, and because those stretch belts are a pain, I told him $100, and he'd rather just run without them. So his choice, no big deal to me. So I'm just gonna knock this out. Doing the thermostat and the sensor should really take you half an hour to an hour with coolant bleeding and all. So it's an easy fix. Most of the work is the diag. So I'll button this up. I'm going to overfill this, run it. When the thermostat opens, it'll suck it down. I'll make sure there's no air in the system. If there's an air bubble, the air bubbles notoriously get stuck at the thermostat and cause the thermostat to not open, which means overheating, and you know how that goes. So I'm going to do the, run it, keep this overfilled. Thermostat opens, pop down, and then I'll put the T in it, and that'll plug the hole, and then just make sure I got the level set, let it get all the way up to where the fans kick on, and if the level's good, I'll let it cool off once, recheck the level, then I'm gonna cut it loose. So that's how this job is gonna end. And actually, I'm gonna road test it and make sure it gets up to 200 degrees on the freeway, like before it was down to 180, 160. So that's how I'll verify this one's solved, and this one will not come back. On a short ride, we're right up to 210, much quicker than before, but I'm gonna put a few more miles on this, put a little more high speed into this, so that way 210, or if it starts to drop like before, if I got up to speed, it would be dropping. And I'm also gonna verify that it doesn't overheat, and then it'll be officially repaired. All right, so like a little further into the drive, if it was doing what it was doing before, that temperature would not be holding at 210. I'm up at 50 miles an hour, so this one's definitely fixed, which is good. So you can verify that in the same way I did to tell if yours is fixed.